Yeah. Okay. Welcome everybody. This scrutiny meeting is being conducted on a hybrid basis in accordance with the Local Government and Elections Wales Act 2021, which will operate alongside the Council's standing orders. The Council's standing orders and code of conduct apply at all times during this virtual meeting in the same way as ordinary meetings, and members should conduct themselves accordingly. I remind members this meeting is being live streamed to the public. Please can I ask those attending to keep your cameras on but mute your microphones when you're not speaking to ensure there is no unnecessary background noise. And I also remind any members joining online to ensure their chat function is switched on and to use that facility to indicate to me when they wish to speak on a particular item. Please do not speak until I invite you to do so, and remember to unmute your microphone. The recorded version of this meeting will be uploaded for public view as soon as possible after the meeting. Whilst translation of the proceedings can be provided upon request, the images and sound recording may also be used for training purposes within the council. Thank you. Okay. Just a couple of formalities on the agenda. Can we note apologies, please, Neil?
The chair is Councillor Thomas, Councillor Craffu, Councillor Linton, and Councillor Holt.
Okay, quite a few apologies today, but we are forward in terms of numbers, so thank you. Next item on the agenda is declarations of interest. Any specific declarations of interest from anybody? Fantastic. Okay, third item on the agenda is the local housing prospectus 2025 to 2026. So I'd invite the cabinet member and the officers to come and join us. We haven't brought the entire housing department. Grab yourself a name badge as well, people, if that's okay, just for the recording afterwards, and for officers who don't know, members who don't know some of you. If we hadn't had all these apologies, they would have brought one as well.
We like the man mark.
Yeah. Okay, so first part of this is an officer presentation. So I'll hand over to you guys in a second, and then members will come in afterwards for questioning, if that's okay. Cabinet member, did you want to say anything, or hand straight over to officers?
Just a few words about me.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, just to outline the main reason of the local housing prospectus. It's essentially to meet the local population and their needs in terms of supply and demand when it comes to housing. We see in the report, it's a forward-looking strategy. We've identified where the shortage in houses lie, particularly with one beds. As you can see, there's a significant need when it comes to one bedrooms. And whilst, it's a projection of 5 years, we're looking at the housing prospectus. It's actually fluid. That can change in time. And we're working very proactively with partners as things change, as demographics change, as the building of homes change in the city. So we're not sitting back and sort of responding to the need. It's more of a proactive approach in liaising with both the community and also stakeholders as a whole. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Before you go into the presentation, apologies, I forgot to declare my interest. If I could just go back, I do work in social housing in the city, so I will declare an interest on that basis. This isn't a decision-making body, so I'm fine with somebody across the chair. Thanks.
Can I just add to that as well, Chair? It's not a specific conflict of interest, but living in the Phil area, I know we'll be linking in with the region part of the Phil master plan. So if you just note that on record, that'd be great as well.
Thanks. Sorry, David, over to you.
No, that's fine. So I'm just going to give a little bit of background, and then Sarah Spicer, who's our Housing Structure and Enabling Manager, will take us through the presentation. So, as Councillor Dan has already kind of described, this document is really important as it really sets out our assessment of need and the context. And it's the product of a lot of work kind of behind that to create our local housing market assessment, which is a a requirement from Welsh Government, and we essentially worked to define methodology to analyse what we project to be the housing need over the coming years. As Councillor Dan has said, there is obviously an element of fluidity to that. And the document itself, you know, it's got quite practical use in that it's a document through which we will work with RSL partners to ensure that when they're bringing forward projects for development and to access capital grants, that we can be assured that actually, you know, that the proposals are going to meet our strategic needs. And the document is also used by Welsh Government as well as a kind of a baseline for their assurance that those capital grants again are going to meet evidence local need in the area. So I'm going to pass on to Sarah now, who's kind of going to go into a little bit more detail and take everybody through a very short presentation to capture the key points. Over to you, Sarah.
Thank you, David. So the presentation picks up on some of the points that have already been raised. So the Housing Prospectus is a document that's produced and updated by Welsh local authorities. They set out our strategic housing priorities for delivering affordable homes. Usually they focus on homes to be delivered using social housing grant, but we've opted to widen the scope and include homes that are going to be provided through both that grant and through the Transitional Accommodation Capital Programme. It provides our evidence base about demand and need for housing in Newport, including the types of homes that are needed and the size of homes that are needed. And on top of that, it provides something that's very accessible and transparent. So our developing partners, but also members of the public, can review this document to understand what demand is, and our housing partners can use that to help inform their search when they're creating their development programmes to make sure they are delivering homes that meet needs in the city. The Prospectus then allows us to make informed decisions based on evidence when we have developments put forward for proposals that require capital funding. So we know whether or not they are meeting need, and they give us a framework for making those decisions. On to the next slide, please. Welsh Government provide us with a template for the document and also the guidance for how to complete the prospectus. And the prospectus has been completed following those guidelines. So we start off by reviewing our existing literature that's relevant to the prospectus. So, for example, Newport's local housing market assessment, our rapid rehousing transition plan. We analyse the data that we have available. So, for example, who's on the Common Housing Register, what households do we have who are in temporary accommodation, what are the groups of people who are on, who make up those two different groups. We demonstrate how schemes will be prioritised within the programme for allocation of grant funding, and we provide information on the monitoring and the governance process for ensuring that social housing grant and the development programmes are delivering. We've picked out a few key pieces of information from the evidence base. So our local housing market assessment shows that for the housing demand that we have in Newport, 84% of that assessed demand is for affordable housing. The remaining 16% is for market housing. We have a projection on net need, so that a certain amount of need will be met from existing stock and from churn and people moving on. And what we can see is that 64% of that unmet need is for one-bedroom accommodation, and then the remaining is split quite equally between 2, 3 and 4-bedroom accommodation. And then we have different levels of evidence and data that support that. So we know through the Common Housing Register that 60% of the need on there is for one-bedroom accommodation. And then there's diminishing demand for 2, 3 and 4-bedroom. All the numbers are on the slide. I won't read them at you. And finally, when we look at all of the households that we have in temporary accommodation, again, the highest level of demand is for one-bedroom accommodation. then 2-bed, then 3-bed and 4-bed. So we're seeing some themes just being echoed through the assessment, the common register, and everyone who's on the housing register and in temporary accommodation. And then finally, something that we picked out because it was quite stark was just the fact that there are a lot of households on the register who are looking for either accessible or adapted homes, and there is quite a gap between supply and demand, so that's being picked out specifically. We've used that to come up with our strategic housing priorities for Newport, which have been identified as follows. So right up at the top are solutions for households who are experiencing or have experienced homelessness. That will be a mix of temporary, transitional and long-term, but there will be a requirement for some specialist and supported housing. And it's there at the top. It's very well discussed within our organisation around the pressures that this is causing. We then need to recognise the huge demand for 1-bedroom general needs accommodation in the city. That doesn't mean that we need to forget about our families who are looking for accommodation, particularly trying to close the gap between supply and demand for households needing larger homes. We have specifically mentioned the need to increase the supply of adapted homes, so everything from accessible to fully adapted for somebody who may need to use a wheelchair indoors. We do need to be mindful of the need to create a diverse range of accommodation that will meet the needs of our ageing population. So making sure that we have accommodation with level access flats, bungalows, independent accommodation, trying to future-proof our stock to meet the needs of everyone within the community. And finally, we have noted the need to provide specialist accommodation. We do work alongside adult social care to identify specific needs for supported and care accommodation to ensure that those needs are being met. In terms of next steps, following consultation and cabinet approval, this prospectus will be presented to Welsh Government for approval. And from then on, the findings within the prospectus will be used by Newport City Council and our developing partners to put forward and bring forward schemes for developments that meet those strategic priorities. We know that the Welsh Government will be using the prospectus to ensure that our capital programmes are meeting the needs and that we're taking an evidence-based approach. And the information in the prospectus will also be shared with planning colleagues and will be fed into the replacement local development plan to make sure that we are providing that evidence base for our policies moving forward. Thank you. That was the end of the presentation, and so we put across for any questions.
Okay, Councillor Moffat.
Thank you, Sarah. I was waiting to ask a question on the RLDP, and you did mention it right at the end. Is it a bit concerning that, first of all, the RLDP process, as I understand it, is running slowly, behind schedule, and even so, as you said that you're going to feed into that process. To me, it would have made sense to feed it in earlier. Are you feeding in at the right time is my question, or could you have fed in earlier? And would it have an impact on the RLDP and any delays?
Thank you, Councillor Moffat. I think in terms of could we have fed it in earlier? Certainly, we've been working through the local housing market assessment. That in turn informs the housing prospectus, which then informs the local development plan. So there is a sort of recognised order in which we do the work and feed that in. So I think it very much feels like the right time to be fed into that. I don't know whether or not.
I think it's just also worth noting that, as Sarah said, the local housing market assessment is done. That's kind of the detailed analysis, and whilst we're going through these formal stages, we need to get the appropriate sign off. Actually, the content of these documents is firstly designed to a set standard, and secondly, it's kind of known. So those discussions with planning colleagues in terms of the replacement local development plan, but also our RSL partners in terms of what they're delivering at the moment. They're ongoing anyway, Councillor Mugford. So I think the context is well understood, and that is also kind of guiding direction of travel.
My second question, if I can, it's quite a difficult dynamic, predicting the future, the growth of the city and the needs. I mean, how do you comment? I mean, how far ahead are you looking? I suppose because the RLDP, for example, how far ahead are you looking in the context of this challenge?
In terms of the prospectus, I think it would be reasonable to think that the prospectus would last more than 5 years. We would also undertake an annual review of the underlying information, and we would be able to do a refresh if anything significant had changed within that period, for exactly the reasons that you're pointing out. If we try to make this a 10-year plan, we know that things will change quite rapidly in housing. They have done every year for the many years that I've worked in the sector. So I think we would expect the document to have a maximum of a 5-year lifespan, and during that time it could undergo 1 or more refreshes just to have a look at that underlying data and see what's changed.
Thank you. That's me then.
That's okay. Can I just come in on the same point, because with the comment I sort of had on the prospectus, really, it's labelled as 25-26, so it implies that it's this financial year that it's relevant to. I wonder whether that kind of needs to be clear that we intend this to be a 3 or a 5 year document that we might review, because our partners delivering sort of those properties, the RSLs in the main, will need to make sort of funding decisions, and I suspect that, I could be wrong, please correct me, that RSLs have already started discussions with you for 25-26 in terms of grants. There's probably money already been allocated from the grant that you sort of expect to get in. And in fact, because it's a 25-26 document, by the time you get Welsh Government approval, we know what happened with the transition plan, the rapid housing transition plan. This just becomes a very outdated very quickly, and I just wonder whether we need to kind of reflect that and think.
I think that's a really fair point. We can look at the language around that, and I think you're completely right, Councillor Howells. We've already had the discussions with the RSLs, and it kind of speaks to the point I was making earlier. This is a really dynamic process that Sarah and her team are reviewing weekly, really, sometimes, depending on what's going on in the wider policy environment. So I think it would be, it's a fair comment, and we'll kind of try and change the language to reflect that dynamism and the fact that it's a look forward, but that's always going to be subject to change. It won't necessarily run financial year to financial year.
I think it's often the things with business scrutiny, isn't it? It's the timing cycle, and we've got to do this because this is what we've got to do in terms of the legislation. It's what we're required to do, and from a Welsh Government point of view, that is the date. But it doesn't make much sense when you're talking about it, because again, more than pretty much everything that's happened in will have been discussed probably a year or 2 years ago, wouldn't it, really?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's a bit disingenuous to say that this is this year's plan when it's not.
So you've required by Welsh Government to submit this, and they expect you to submit another one next year, the year after, or the year after. Right.
No, if we did do a refresh, they would want to review the refresh, but no, there isn't an expectation.
Okay, so this has come out of a piece of legislation, requiring you to have one, I guess.
What we need to do is have a housing prospectus that is reflective of the current situation within Newport. So yeah, absolutely. When that situation changes, then we will update those.
Sorry.
No, very enough.
When we talk about the RLDP again, that is a strategic activity. We're not going to see houses built, or if I can guess, and we'll be talking about another 2 years. Is it that far out?
Absolutely.
So it's not that relevant to you in the shorter term, the next couple of years. You're not going to get any real benefit other than to feed into it and do some longer strategic planning. So that's something you factored in as well, is it? So you're looking for the next couple of years with the anticipation the RLDP is over the hill in terms of delivery?
So yeah, and I think David touched on this earlier. I would say over the last year, since the findings from the local housing market assessment, since we started doing this piece of work, the conversations have already shifted with our RSL partners about the types of homes that we're looking to deliver and the tenure mix. So I think you are right. It will be 2 or 3 years until we start to see the schemes that are funded this year being delivered. But I think some of the changes that we already knew about, those conversations started last year. So we're doing everything we can to, it's very much a pipeline, isn't it? Something starts here and things here. But those conversations haven't started today. They started probably in David's tenure. Have it being more reflective of what we know.
It's worth just pointing out. So it's not that any of these any housing growth will wait on the LDP.
Yeah.
This is an ongoing process. So a lot of the stuff that came in last year would be within the existing. This is basically saying of that social housing, we need more of it. We need more one-bedroom focus. So that will inform those things that's going on. And FHG, all those grants are annual, aren't they? So they come on. This is more that again, the core point is, what is the purpose of it in some regards? I don't want to say because we have to do it. But when we're putting in graphs, we actually do evidence things. We're asked for this in that process, so it isn't perfect because of that. The time period looking at it is weird, isn't it? That's to be honest. So, but that's the reason it's there. But nothing is. We can't develop any more social housing until the next RLP comes along. That's happening anyway. That's continuous.
Just to expand on Paul's point slightly, practically away from the local housing market assessment, we, in terms of our capital grants, it's a 3-year rolling programme, and we're always looking into the 4th year because of the way building works. So is that kind of, in some ways, those development is quite a fast-paced process in terms of development. So we've really consistently got a key handle on what the current lay of the land is, with some horizon scanning to how we think that's going to change. So it should be, our discussions with RSLs and other partners are based on the situation as it is, rather than waiting on an assessment that something outdated to be approved.
Final question. The other thing, I guess, which is again coming from the RLDP situation, in terms of the needs, I mean, you have to prioritise it, don't you? What you're looking at has to have priorities on it. Because if you build, people will come. So it's almost like if you had overabundance of housing, it would be filled because people would come in from other areas where the needs are not being satisfied. How are you working with prioritisation? Could you just give a little bit of a feel on that?
Yeah, so this document is used to support the delivery of social housing, and social housing is allocated through Newport's allocations policy, the home options policy. So that clearly sets out how we'll prioritise applicants based on their housing needs. That would include their housing status. If someone is adequately housed in owner-occupied accommodation, everyone can join the register. That would attract a far lower priority than maybe someone who's living in a privately rented flat and is overcrowded. So these properties have that kind of, whilst it's not attached to this policy, that the allocations policy really kind of guides all of our prioritisation.
So I guess what I'm drilling down to, are the priorities for Newport-based people, or somebody from Bristol, they get themselves on this priority list?
Onto the allocations policy. Yeah. As things stand at the moment, anybody can join the allocations policy.
Just to add into that, it's set out in legislation and policy, yeah. So it's not something we.
I'm just trying to get an understanding.
Dictate on a local level. Yeah. Obviously, as you're aware, overarching policies, legislation where Welsh Government had a steer as well. And I think we have to be really cognizant about that as well. I mean, if you want to add on to
that. 100% straight. So anyone could join it in theory, but their priority would be very, very low. And because of the level of demand, it would be unlikely to bid successfully. It's probably just worth noting, building on Saeed's point slightly, that the Homelessness and Allocations Bill, which is going to be shortly making its way through the Senate scrutiny process will change and give local authorities more power to set who can actually access the allocation register. So,
Is the second one from Nate or yeah?
no, it's going through the Senate scrutiny process at the moment, so there'll be a possibly up to a 10-year implementation policy for certain aspects. Well, let's not talk about that. I could talk to you about this bill for hours, and it's probably not worth going into now. Into the kind of words.
I just want to ask you a question regarding one-bedroom hot properties. Is Newport unique in a shortage, or is it the same with the cities and local authorities?
And every authority I speak to, and I chair Housing Leadership Cymru, which is like the WGLA group for heads of housing, single person accommodation is the most significant pressure at the moment, and it's a challenge both in terms of the lack of supply, but also, as Sarah mentioned, in terms of our strategic priorities. It's how do you balance that acute need that we have at the moment with the need to kind of create sustainable communities, but also to recognise that for lots of people within that cohort, their needs and their accommodation requirements will likely change in the future. So,
do we know why there is a short? Why?
It's a demographic shift, isn't it? That we're seeing, less people are, I suppose, getting married, less people want to family, want to live on their own.
Mainly older people or younger people? Do we have that information?
it's a real mix. It's a real mix. Yeah.
But there are more, it is across the board. We've got more, young, single males, young adults who, are choosing that lifestyle. And I suppose the challenge you got, even if it's a small percentage, across the whole city, then trying to move that with new housing stock is a challenge, isn't it?
Might be controversial, but is this linked to immigration? Single family.
Particularly, is it? There doesn't seem to be any correlation.
I've not seen any trends that suggest that.
Any other questions from any of the committee?
Yeah,
Yeah, go on. Councillor Brown first, and then Councillor Sorry. That's okay.
well, Sonia, we've addressed that there's a need for more accessible housing. So what incentives are there to make private landlords actually make those housing accessible?
So in terms of the housing prospectus, it's very much focused on our registered social landlords because the incentives are them accessing capital grant. So we are having conversations with them as we negotiate around developments and our requirements to ensure that they are looking at those needs. So for example, if they were building a new apartment block, could ground floor properties have no limited stairs in order to be able to get into the building? Would they consider putting in showers instead of baths to be able to do that? And then kind of working our way through to some of the larger developments and trying to get a small percentage of those homes to actually be built to a higher specification for that. So looking for people who, all the way up to, as I said, have feeding wheelchair accommodations inside the property. And our RSL partners are very on board with having those conversations with us around how they build that into future developments.
Just to add on to that, it's certainly, I think, it's the sharing repair initiative by Pobble in terms of adaptive homes, home improvements, and having that accessibility for the older demographic. So there are Steve's out there. We're actively working with ourselves around that.
Okay. Anything else? Right, Councillor Screen.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I saw some interest in demographics the other week, which suggests that in Wales, approximately a third of the population are classed as elderly. We got, compared to the rest of the UK, we got very much an ageing population in Wales. However, Newport seems to have bucked that trend. In that we got, I understand we got quite a younger population, and we're one of the fastest growing cities in Wales. So how do those sort of demographics affect housing planning? Does it have any effect, or have you factored that in to, you know, demand for housing, particularly for young people, perhaps single people, you know, looking for accommodation.
And so one of the things that we picked up as part of the local housing market assessment is, although you are right, Newport does have quite a young population, there is still an overrepresentation of older people within our demographic. So Newport very much has an aging population and a large population of older people. What we are finding at the moment is there is a little bit of a tension around that fact. And actually, for some of the homes that we have at the moment that are specifically for older people, there are lower levels of demand. And I think what we're recognising is that culturally and societally, what it means to be old is different. So the age at which people feel old, it is different. So quite often when we're talking about older people accommodation, you start to talk about people who are 55 plus.
Oh, but
Probably quite a few people in the room who would really disagree with that. And I think some of the models that we have at the moment aren't working. So what we have built into the prospectus is the need to have a look, it's the need to future-proof the accommodation, and that thing around having general needs accommodation that's going to be fit for people as they get older, having ground floor flats that are accessible for people. But I think there's probably some more work to be done to look at how we strategically prepare our housing stock for those changes. So more work to be done, but we are very mindful of that, and that has been reflected.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thanks.
Thanks. Any other questions from the committee?
I've just got that one regarding the housing leasing scheme. I think that's what they got it for. Yeah. How successful has it been? Because we've run it for a while now.
So we had a target for all of our leasing schemes last year to acquire 30 properties. We did 31. So it's building momentum. I think the other thing that's worth saying is that we did 31, but only were able to fully recruit to the team driving that process from, it was early January, wasn't it, John, that the 2 additional acquisition officers joined. So we are seeing some success. I think with it, and I think, you know, there's a couple of things we're thinking about in terms of the private leasing scheme, Wales and the private rented sector more generally, actually, and ensuring that we've got as much publicity out there as possible. So over the past couple of months, we've done some advertising on the market, which is, it's not quite Rightmove, but it's a website used by the industry. We're also amplifying Welsh Government messaging that's going out all the time around Leasing Scheme Wales. And we're looking at a package of incentives to encourage more landlords to work with the authority. And also particularly with Leasing Scheme Wales, often as a local authority, we work with the smaller private landlords who maybe inherited a property. Actually, I think Leasing Scheme provides quite a good option for larger landlords to consider, you know, working with us. So that's going to be an ongoing piece of development over the year or so.
Okay. Any other questions from the committee? Just got a couple of that's okay. I always wait till last.
There you do.
Try not to go on some, to be honest. It's a particular area of frustration of mine. So the challenge, having been in the RSL sector for some time, and I'm not now, so I can perhaps speak a bit more candidly. Is an area that a piece of work I did for the Child and Senior Housing a few years back around sort of development decisions based on feedback that's got. And the reality is that housing professionals like yourselves that are producing these documents are not the ones that are at the forefront of deciding what the RSLs build, because normally the finance and development guys are. And we see a number of RSLs building significant numbers of open market homes for sale. And, you know, that to me to the detriment of the numbers that they're able to produce, because there's only so much capacity you've got for development. So the more of that you do, the less affordable homes you can do. So how do we kind of shift the focus from the RSLs in terms of numbers to kind of people and outcomes? And I think that's the biggest challenge of this document, which it's got the people and outcomes in there, but the reality is I don't think we're littered with opportunities that we can kind of turn ourselves down and say, we're not going to fund that because instead we're going to fund this, this and this. Because we're almost grateful for development because we've got such a lack of it that we're kind of not then able to say, actually, that development doesn't really suit us because we're just happy to get numbers through the door. And so there's a focus on some of these numbers in the plan, which I think are great, a great deal. I'm not sure what the question is yet. It's probably that question. How do we shift the focus from numbers on viability to actually focus on delivery? The second point is around the accessible homes, which I was really sort of pleased for you to put in. Working in development itself, it's really hard to increases the build costs when you put those sort of specialist things in. So again, the numbers make the decision, so you tend to shy away from it. So is there a way that, and I don't know if this document, it's in the remit of this document, is there a way that you can offer an incentive on additional grant to reduce those numbers? So, I know that the sort of percentage models have moved a bit now, and they always used to be traditionally 58%, but I know that's sort of much more sort of fluid. But you might be able to offer an incentive where if you get a higher percentage of accessible homes that are needed, you might be able to increase the grant level as an incentive to do that.
That's exactly the opposite of what I was going to say.
So Sarah will probably add in more of the kind of technical detail side of things. So I think the first question, that kind of the gap between delivery and need, I think there's a couple of key ways in which we're kind of seeking to bridge that gap. So without sounding kind of flippant about it, I think a lot of it does come down to establishing those really positive relationships with ourselves. And one of the things that we developed, and Sarah's really driven, is firstly trying to have more rounded conversations. So now, I think previously we'd meet with the housing side of an RSL, the development side of an RSL, the community side separately. Now with our key RSLs in the city, we have multi-agency or multidisciplinary meetings so that we can have that rounded conversation to really try and ensure from our perspective that each side of the business understands where our key priorities are and where they may. I think as well, we've introduced, probably been in place now about a year, new governance process. So actually, there are kind of key decision points within the year and a really fairly robust kind of process for establishing what's going to go into the grant programme. So there's scrutiny from colleagues within Sarah's service, elsewhere in housing, but also regen planning. And then there is essentially an advisory board that I sit on, again, along with planning and regen, to kind of get that rounded look over. Firstly, our developments meeting our assessed needs, but then also the deliverability in terms of things like planning legislation and SABs and kind of flood risk issues. So I think that picture is developing to try and align need and development more closely. We are helped with things like the Transitional Accommodation Capital Programme, which does specifically target capital grant in certain cohorts. Those cohorts are the most need. And I think in fairness to the RSL partners that we work with, they are producing a good number of projects for our consideration. And we are now in a space where we're having those conversations around how those models can be tweaked to better fit our assessed needs and working through some of that complexity. Back to that.
Yeah, just to add, at the moment, our programme is oversubscribed. So, in essence, we do have said no to things because something does not meet our strategic need. And so we are starting to see the developments being put forward very much being shaped to the priorities that we have identified. So I think that process is already in place. In terms of how do we incentivise to allow more accessible homes to be built? So the RSLs can now claim up to 70% with grant against any scheme. They need to meet certain standards, and within that, I think we probably are delivering a number of homes that are accessible, if not adapted. And we probably need to do a little bit more to have a look at how we're working actively now on how we allocate those to make sure that they are going to people who meet those needs. And as I said, there's certainly the RSLs are very open to those conversations about actually, and what about something which is a higher specification and a higher standard. So if funding were a blocker to that, Welsh Government are very accessible, and certainly that would be something we could have a conversation with our RSL partners and our Welsh Government to work out how we can block that.
Just one final point. So you talked a couple of times in terms of the adaptations around sort of getting something at a higher spec.
Yes.
I mean, we ought to be building to both lifetime homes and WPQR and everything. So I presume everything's got to meet these two things.
Yes, absolutely. And
When you say higher spec, I guess
So
you
it's
mean
probably-
additional kits and stuff like that.
yeah, I am talking about additional. So what I'm talking about at the far end is we have a small number of households in the register who need to be able to use a wheelchair indoors. So that means wider doorways, turning circles, potentially ceiling hoists. And those numbers are much smaller, but they are much harder to meet. So when I'm talking about high spec, I am talking about, I should probably refer to it more as something that's fully wheelchair accessible. There are smaller numbers of those needed, but definitely we need that scale of accessible homes, showers, all the way through to homes that could have a stair lift or do have a stair lift or a through lift, to homes that are fully wheelchair accessible.
One of the challenges has always been that those adaptations are very bespoke to the individual, and it's really hard to kind of design something without an end user in mind. So you can kind of put all this on, and then it's like, well, that doesn't quite work for me, and it's like, oh, you know, and so the challenge has always been, because development is that 2 years ahead that you sort of talked about. Somebody doesn't want to sit here and say, yeah, I need that property, but I'm going to wait 2 years for it. So it's kind of like really hard to sort of make that decision right up front 2 years ahead. And then somebody sat there saying, yeah, I'll wait for 2 years for that to come along, isn't it? So
It's a really difficult tension to iron out. I think we need to work with our occupational therapist colleagues to make sure that we are designing homes that could be fit for an end user. But if their circumstances change, or if it doesn't deliver for them, that's adaptable enough to meet the needs of somebody else.
yeah,
So I think it does need quite a lot of a coordinated effort to make that work. However, it's obviously incredibly important that we do so, and I know that there are conversations that take place between all of the relevant groups to try and make sure that we are delivering on that front. So that would be something we would like to work.
and if that's an incredible amount of work, do you have the resources?
So we certainly, it wouldn't just be from within our service areas, it would be around talking with social care, with registered social landlords. But as I said, I do know that those conversations do go on, so I would feel confident that work will continue.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. That's it from me. Any other questions from anybody? Thank you. So thanks all. We just need to formulate any recommendations. I don't know if you want to run through, probably the only one was the first one I made, I think, around
Yeah, make the language use.
the sort of dates and years, I think.
That's right.
Was there any other recommendations? And nothing that you picked up on, I think it was just that one. Yeah.
Is there anything specific you're looking for? Because obviously it is the projected sort of 5 year. Do you want a 5 year at the top? What would the committee like?
I think that's for you to go in and think about, rather than us to dictate to you what it should be. I think just a bit of clarity for the reader, but you know, this is an involved document.
Dynamic.
Yeah, yeah, great. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great, so okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Cheers, thanks all. We always get the time right here, don't we, let's be fair. Pretty perfect, yeah, we did ask you to come in and go, it was this one or two, so that's not bad, yeah.
When you leave as well.
Only fair, I can't take any credit for the timing because it's Neil that suggests them, so he can have all the credit.
What's in there?
Okay, so we have done all item 3 and we're on to item 4, which is the Newport placemaking plan, as it is titled in the agenda. So we're going to offer a presentation first and then we'll open to questions. So we'll let the officers go through, but if I can invite the cabinet member as to whether you want to say anything before I have the order officers.
No, I'm happy to hand over. No, I'm happy to hand over. Thank you, Chair.
No problems. Yeah, go for it. We'll trace it over to you.
Yeah, I'm just going to share my screen a second.
Yeah, it's easy to control it. Yeah. Yeah, go for it.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks so much for inviting us to come to Scrutiny today to talk to you about the Newport placemaking. So just to remind members, there's been a lot of consultation on this and what we engaged on this, but there was 3 stages to this placemaking plan. The first stage being the collection of baseline information. So what is it we're working with? What was the data available to us? What do people think about the city centre? Second was about engagement. So what do people, we know what we had, what do people want, what do people see as being important to the city centre and how we can make improvements to the city centre. And the third stage was obviously to prepare the draft plan. Just in terms of that stage 2 stakeholder engagement, as I mentioned, we did extensive engagement and consultation. We had a steering group which comprised of a number of different external partners and organisations, like Ymddiheuriadau Properties, Dragons RFC, Tramship Tech, Newport Accessibility Group, Newport Now Bid, and Health Board, Welsh Government and Public Group. We also had a cross-party working group. I think we had 5 meetings with the cross-party working groups chaired by current member Cynllun. We also did extensive public consultation over a number of different events. There was one report, citizens panel, 171 responses, city centre survey, which had over 1,200 responses. We also presented at the staff conference. That's over 100 people directly engaged as a result of us presenting the placemaking plan. And we also did a consultation then on 60 big ideas, which was essentially what the public had said to us and our stakeholders. They said to us some really good ideas where we could inject some vibrancy and some vitality into the city centre. So you can see we had a number of different responses from there from the public, as well as workshops which would target specific groups, and then an online survey which took about 700 responses as well. We also presented twice to the One Newport Partnership Groups. That was back in September 2024 to let them know what we were doing and how it was going. And then also about 2 weeks ago, we presented the draft plan to the partnership, and that was positively received. So we're at stage 3 now. So you've seen in your papers, you've actually got a copy of the draft plan. So what we've managed to do and what we've agreed as part of the vision statement for the draft plan is we're looking at a new era for Newport. It's a new era for the city centre. We know what we've got, what we've had. But this is about how do we create this new era and move forward in a positive way. So the vision statement you'll see is essentially says to the reader the year's 2040. So it's a 15-year plan. But in the year 2040, Newport will be a celebrated city, famed for its music scene, heritage, and its people. The city centre will thrive in the place, filled with excitement and fun experiences, an impressive mix of local independence, leisure offerings, events, education opportunities, music, homes and offices can all be found here. There are only now a handful of empty buildings, all ready and waiting for their next tenants, and landlords are actively looking for new features. In 2025, Newport City Council, key stakeholders and local community started some initiatives to improve the foundations of the city centre, and they continue to flourish today. Those quick win projects, better street lighting, public art, music on the streets, and wayfinding built momentum for a positive future for the city and ensured Newport's evolution as one the community is part of and proud of. It is welcoming and safe in the city centre. People now while away their time and watch around the city. Days out easily turn into nights out, as locals and visitors spend longer in the city with experiences that make them truly eager to return. Civic pride and confidence has grown, and businesses are choosing to locate into the city. The event scene is booming. The city is proud to have Wales's largest food festival, anchored by Newport Market, and the prestigious and internationally recognised Grassroots Music Festival. Both of these are delivered in partnership with local visitors and creators, bringing music lovers to the city from far and wide. Rodney Parade is one of the jewels of the crown of Newport, which now has an exciting events calendar featuring large-scale music acts. Its partnership with the Celtic Collection sees it frequently host events for international investors and growing businesses. Of course, County and Dragons still call it home. The city has reconnected with the river as again. The river, Newport, Steel Wave Market and Medieval Ship project will ensure the city now fully embraces one of its greatest assets. The city's wealth of heritage has been restored and supports a nationally recognised heritage trail, telling Newport's story of resilience and rebellion to locals and visitors alike, connecting the dots of the past whilst looking to the future. Perhaps the boldest physical change in the city centre is the new public open space which has been created. This outdoor space is used daily by everyone as the first choice for residents, visitors and students from the bustling Newport Knowledge Quarter, looking for space to enjoy with friends and family. However, the biggest change by far to Newport is the identity and perception of the city. Most importantly, Newport's fallen in love with Newport again, and the world can see what the city and its people have to offer. So moving on to the objectives of the plan, I want Newport to be a proud city. It is a proud city. It's characterised by history, music, industry, independent spirit of its people. A place filled with bold, rebellious ambition. But the city is in transition, and the city centre specifically needs a new chapter in its history. Most importantly, Newport needs to fall in love with Newport again. Importantly, this plan heavily focuses on people and community, civic pride, identity, meaning, safety, activity and vibrancy. Just going back to the objectives of the plan, at the heart of that is that bold vision, and then we looked at what a long-term plan would look like, what those earlier interventions look like, importantly what needs fixing, and what we need to build strong foundations for. But importantly, and what is at the heart of this plan is that it's a shared responsibility. So it's not just down to the council to deliver these objectives and deliver this vision. It's going to take all our partners and our residents and our communities to come together and really importantly to shout about what's good about Newport. I think one of the biggest elements of the feedback was that there's a lot of negative perception that people don't champion the city. They don't shout about what's good about the city, and there is lots to be proud of. Lots to shout about when we get drawn into a continual and never-ending cycle of negativity. Just in terms of boundary of the city centre master plan, so the red line denotes the area of focus. Area beyond this, in terms of the immediate community, so the likes of Pill, Maidie, and Victoria, what will be left behind by this plan, but we're saying this is the core city centre focus as we see it, and any projects outside of this red line boundary, as long as there is some additionality and some sort of synergy with what we're trying to achieve with the city centre, would be accessible and eligible for Welsh Government funding. So themes and priorities. So as part of that extensive consultation that I mentioned earlier, a number of themes and priorities came out. So identity and perceptions, safety and security, retail, sport and leisure and the role that has in the city, and equally how culture and heritage and the role that has in the city centre and how we can improve that. Music and our music heritage was a massive theme that ran throughout the consultation. So again, looking at how we can build upon that and how we can embrace, how we can celebrate that. Open space, play space, event space. Importance of the river was also a common theme as part of the consultation, and living and working in the city centre. So you'll see from the draft plan that's in your report that there's a number of different priority measures that are included. So I'm not going to go through all of those because it's quite a long document, as you'll see. But just in terms of identity and perception, priority measure, I just want to highlight this, going back to this issue about perception and people really needing to try and champion the city and city centre. We're noting that a key challenge for placemaking plans to tackle how we amplify the identity of what it means to be a Newportonian and challenge and change those perceptions that people have about the city. So you'll see that's a common theme that runs throughout this plan. So in terms of interventions, as I mentioned, it's a 15-year plan. So what we've done is we've broken those down into short-term, medium-term and long-term. So the short-term interventions will what we call the quick wins. So they should take us 1 to 2 years to deliver. They're going to be community-led with council support, and we're hoping that you'll see immediate and visible benefits in that 1 to 2 year period. And there's medium-term, which we're looking at 2 to 7 years. So those are going to take longer to implement. There'll be greater stakeholder involvement, and it may be that other partners are delivering those alongside or in addition to the council. Community engagement will be required as part of the delivery of those projects, and obviously funding will be required from multiple sources in order to deliver those medium-term priorities. So in the longer term, this is what we're saying is going to take 7 years plus to deliver. These are going to be some major infrastructural policy change projects. Obviously, they'll need to align with longer-term council policies, but they'll also need to consider environmental, social and economic factors, so including climate resilience and future urban growth, but they're going to be the really quite big strategic projects. So just then turning back to the short-term projects, so just giving you an example of what we're looking at. So Happy Hoardings, we call these, but essentially it's recognising that there are a number of empty properties in the city centre. Their appearance is sadly quite poor and in need of addressing. I would just add, I think we've mentioned a number of times that the empty properties in the city centre are by far owned by the private sector, by absent landlords, investment opportunities. So the council, whilst we don't own them, we don't have any leverage over them in terms of bringing them back into use necessarily. What we have looked at is how we can use vinyls and hoardings to essentially improve the appearance of them in the street scene, but also showcase some of our local artworks. So we're working with local artists in order to deliver what we've called the Happy Hoarding scheme. Medium term, so just an example again I've taken from the plan that you've got in your papers, is about the river. So this was a really sort of common theme that ran through the consultations, and what people would like to see is there being a better interaction, better connection with the river. So just some of the art that's possible, but these are obviously going to be the 2 to 7 year time frame, would be how do we create sort of more basically more interaction with the river, and sort of just gone like in terms of the examples we gave. So there was a wide range, so I'm just looking. One of the things I did like, and you'll see at the bottom left-hand side of the picture, was just about how we could use examples from elsewhere. So the ghost ship in Philadelphia, it was just a projected light on the river at darkness. We've got our own ship. While we're trying to find that longer-term home for it, why don't we explore whether we can project an image of our own ship onto the river, near where it was found. So there's lots of things that we can look at and we can consider. But the river is a really important feature, and it was a really important reason why Newport as a city, as a town back in the day, was so successful and became sort of the industrial heart of this part of Wales. So we really do need to undertake a feasibility study, I think, to understand what we can do in terms of those direct interventions. Lots of things were discussed about maybe a river taxi up to Cynllun. There was also water sports like that. So it's tidal. We need to understand how that actually work and what the infrastructure would be required to make that happen. But certainly, it's a really exciting suggestion that's been made, and something that we would definitely need to look into. So long term, as I mentioned, this is more the strategic project. So this is where we're looking at, like, you know, where are our strategic interventions across the city centre. You know, we know that the, as we call the bottom end of the south end of Commercial Street in particular, is looking very tired, probably needs of some investments, some regeneration. So we probably look at certain areas under that longer term plan to see how we can bring those areas back to life and bring the vibrancy and the vitality that they were looking to inject across the city centre. So just in terms of future monitoring, you know, we can't just have a plan and just leave it there. We need to make sure that everybody is everybody's taken ownership of this and is accountable for the implementation and delivery of this. So there's a number of different plans that we've got either agreed in terms of the culture strategy, in train, such as the placemaking plan, and also the destination management and marketing plan. So what we're suggesting, Chair, is that we create a strategic place board, which would oversee the delivery and implementation of all these place-based plans. So that gives the accountability and the monitoring of the delivery of these plans. But we don't see that as just being a council, internal council board. That would be a board where our key partners and stakeholders will form part of that board. And obviously that ensures co-ownership, because we would equally be challenging our partners about how they're delivering and embracing the placemaking plan. But also gives us the challenge that we need to make sure that we're delivering at pace and we're fulfilling the objectives that we've set ourselves. That's it, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Watford, up to you.
Thank you. I'd like to start off by saying I really enjoyed reading this document. Took a long time. There's a lot in there, but also there's a lot to challenge. Prior to this, I believe this is the first Newport placemaking plan. Prior to that, we had a what was it called, a master plan, 2018. So this placemaking plan has been quite a long time coming. And as I say, on the plus side, I really enjoyed reading it. There are some things, because my mind works a little bit analytically. Is this a Newport placemaking plan, or is this a city centre region placemaking plan? Because it's ambiguous. It isn't a Newport placemaking plan as such. It's more about the city centre. Could we be clear in the way that we present this to the public? I live a long way from the city centre. What does the placemaking plan talk to about my area about? What does it talk to Cynllun about? Yeah. So that's my first question. I'd invite some feedback on. So let's give feedback on that. Why is it called the Newport placemaking plan when it's really the Newport city centre region?
That's a really good question, and I think for the chair of the group here, you know, we took this over for a long time, went through all the different steering groups, corresponding living groups, and before we settled on what the actual title should be. So I think one in the mix was also the city centre placemaking plan. But this was the agreed title that collectively the groups have. Because
what we have to do, and it is us, we have to sell this to the residents of the city. That's really why I'm coming in that direction. It's about how we promote this plan and who it's for. Yeah.
Just on that, sorry, Chair,
No,
what I was going to add was that this is just one of a number of different plans, strategic plans that we have. So I think you heard me mention the destination management and marketing plan. So that would be citywide. That's what we've got, you know, to offer across the rest of the city. But you know, the city centre is a Welsh Government priority as well. The town centre's first priority is a priority for the council and for government. So we're focusing on that. That unlocks significant access to funding for us as well. So that's why we're focusing very much on this city centre issues.
I think it would be nice if it was unveiled and clear on the big picture of where they all fit together, where they lock together. I'll jump to, I was going to mention this later on, but on page 77 of the plan, next steps, Commercial Street South, you jump back to a master plan. You say, we've moved away from the master plan, we've got this placemaking plan, and then it says, next steps, commission a master plan to develop proposals for this intervention. Now, I'd like to think that this document that we're looking at today, what was it say?
Page 77.
The actual page 77, not from the information back. It says commercial seat, so that's just so you can locate it. It says the next step is to commission a master plan. Again, I think this adds to a little bit, makes it a bit confusing, because what I would like to see is that this document, which I praised in the offset, is a living document, which I think, Tracy, you mentioned as well. You know, we're not going to put this document away and forget about it. It has to be reviewed periodically. And the more periodically it's reviewed, to my mind, the better. Yeah, there's that. I think that's just a point to raise.
Yeah, come back on that point. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, this is, as I said, this is a strategic high level document. We couldn't implement any regeneration schemes on the basis of just this document alone. It's too high level. You know, in anything that we do in terms of regeneration projects, cost plans, development appraisals. I think what we've done is we just covered that as a master plan to make sure that we're saying that actually there's different layers of feasibility and understanding delivery. Especially for something like Commercial Street, which is there.
We've set the context of the need for this. So this the highest level plan says that's what's going to do. So we have to do that. But the detailed interventions sit below it. Some of them quite easy, won't require much work. They'll just be they're done, they'll be ticked off. But obviously, you know, some of the other bigger, more large scale will require fixtures with this.
Yeah.
Somewhere at the beginning of the document, it talks about public conveniences. So I did a search for the document. I thought this is interesting. We're talking about, you know, the needs for toilets in the city. So I did a search for the whole document, and it wasn't mentioned. There's one right at the beginning. I'll find it better to spread out. So my question is about, you know, we want to attract more people to the city, and there has been discussions on this, and there has been some funding made available for public convenience. Not a huge amount. Remember rightly, it's like 16,000. Is it the case that there will be another master plan to look at, or is this not part of the thinking? You know, that other people provide the toilets.
I can argue it is part of it, and there won't be another plan for public conveniences. It's something we're dealing with at the moment. Within this.
But it's not visible inside here in any meaningful way. That's my point.
Not every project details though. We've given some examples of some of the quick wins, as we call them, things that we're working on. But there's other things, other strategies, other plans that we're working on that aren't detailed specifically in there. So you're not going to find reference to every single.
No. But it's almost, and to me, that's a little bit about where the plan causes me some concern. And I know it could be 1,000-page plan, couldn't it, if you put everything in. But some of the key things that we know are potentially problematic. For example, a lot of the hows are missing. The how are we going to do it? The detail, right? And if what is a plan? Plan is not about detail, what is it? And again, as I say, it's a great document because it allows us to get our teeth into it. But there's a lot of questions that come out. How's that going to happen? When's that going to happen? Where's the money coming from?
I suppose it isn't that point of this is the questions. It is to have that openness and that's why we had the cross-party steering group.
Exactly.
To have those questions, and it was good to see that the majority of parties participated in it. And I think sort of those will be answered throughout the process. Because for us it was to get what's needed, speak to Newport, and get it down, and then to move it forward. you'll see that progress, and that's where the scrutiny committees, that's when we come back to you. You'll see how that will develop over time, and those questions will be answered. But I think to answer all those questions in one document, as I said, it would be a 1,000-page document, and that's what we didn't want to do.
But it's just an observation. I think that it does raise those questions. I don't agree for the answers, but they're not there yet.
Tracy mentioned the place board be set up, so what's key for the plan is we can be all our partners rather than just being the council document, and the council deliver all of the schemes. Could be in place for the membership without the capability to deliver some of these projects, but it'd be remiss of us in terms of being a collaborative document to almost fix that in place of the plan. Being our partners around it and discuss with them how should this be delivered, what can we bring to the table. It might not be something that's funded, or be it that funding reference is still running on, which can support them to be. This is us still there. What can you do in markets? What can you do in Kings, Florida, wherever it be? Where could you fill this need and identify the place maker plan rather than setting out this is what there's going to be a discussion and a collaborative part to see what we can bring to the table.
So it begs the question. I've got a lot of things I could say. What about this? What about that? Active travel. Or on the active travel side, are we going to encourage bikes? Would it be a good idea to have the scooters like other cities have? Is this the right time then actually to talk about these things, or do we say, what feedback can we have and recommendations can we put in at this point as part of the challenge thing? Because the document is what it is, and I have a lot of things I'd like to discuss, but the answer is going to be that's coming later. That's coming later. It's worth raising it.
I think it's just bringing it back to the point again, Chair, that this is a strategic high-level document, and the rest of it's sort of something like that environment is going to flow from that. And there are plans with extra travel in the city centre, so those are in development. And
we have to look elsewhere for those types of plans.
I think there's always going to be a bit of that, isn't it? I mean, active travel is a classic one you mentioned. I think that's important in the city centre, but all that comes in a different process because it's through the integrated network map, and that comes here, doesn't it? But how do we pinpoint it?
I guess
how do we show that?
I guess, Paul, it's really, is this part of the vision? So there were top level things that you could say. There was some reference to extracting energy from the river, which is a bit vague. It's not. We're not going to build a barrage, I don't think, in my lifetime. But there's other ways of extracting energy. Is there a vision to have more solar panels? Can we be creative and how we make a sort of net zero city centre? Wind turbines. Is there creative ways of doing that? And all I'm going to say now is, are the police stakeholders in this? Because they weren't mentioned.
yes, they have been part of our steering group, and also they're part of one Newport partnership as well. So they're fully aware of the commitments, and we have very positive feedback.
And I think they should be stakeholders, because one of the big issues with the city perceived along real is the safety, and it's mentioned a few times. Saying that Newport's a safe city. I wonder, because I think earlier on we spoke about how ambitious is this plan, and I think there's some mixed feelings as to how ambitious it is. I'd like to, when you started off, I'd like to say the year is 2030. There's a lot of that, that follows on. You can say city centres, well, 5 years away, the city centre is a thriving place, 2030. Filled with excitement and fun experiences, 2030. Impressive mix of local, blah, 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 blah. Having a 15-year plan is great. I think you've got to do that. And it goes beyond the lifetime of probably a lot of us in, maybe some of the officers will be here in 15 years' time. It's a great thing to do, but is it ambitious enough, I guess, is my challenge.
I suppose from my side, this was.
Don't be negative.
No. This went out to, as I said, a lot of groups and a lot of people. I know it was a city centre survey of 1,200 people, and this is what they've put together. the stakeholders, the key holders, yes, so this is their plan. And I think sort of, I understand, Councillor Moffat, that, it'd be great if it was a 5-year plan, but some of this is not achievable in that time scale. So I think we've got to be honest, but let me tell you, if we can quicken up the process and move things along, fantastic. But we've also got to see what's achievable. And I think sort of we would be criticised, or I certainly would be criticised if I put a 5-year plan and said I'm going to achieve all this in 5 years. So I think it's getting that balance. But if we can move things forward, absolutely. And as I said, what we've responded to is the people in Newport.
Exactly. Don't get me wrong. I think a 15-year plan is great, but I think that saying in 15 years' time, this is where we'll be. I think there's some steps on the way, which are, you've got the strategies inside, but in terms of the vision, I think there should be some intermediate. Don't wait till 2040 for all this, by the way. This should be part of the vision. This is a progressive, ongoing development that will give major benefits.
Absolutely.
That's all. And
100%
message.
100%. And I think that's why there's the short-term, medium-term, and long-term strategies.
Later on.
No, the first one is between now and the first 2 years.
The first thing you look at is the vision.
Right.
Yes.
But the short term is 0 to 2 years.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, I'm hoping the 2 years we'd have a lot done.
Sell it.
But we are. But also we've got to really be realistic. So it's getting that balance. And the feedback we got from the steering groups was we were pretty much there, and they said if we can overachieve, fantastic. But that's why there is that short, medium, and long for that reason.
Can I just interject on that 2 years, Councillor? Would it be a good time to come back and review it then? I know we've mentioned like 5 years time. Did we review it and see what?
I think we come back every 6 months.
Oh, we come back to that.
Essentially, it'll be part of our service plan, so
Yeah.
we'll be giving you updates.
Oh,
So
good.
keep
Oh, that's
as
okay.
part of that. Specifically.
No, not that, but I think also I think we can come back, but we're hoping it'll be noticed.
Yeah.
That's what we're hoping. We're hoping that Newport will be noticed, the residents will see it. So as much as we can sort of sit in a committee room, we're really hoping, Councillor Pym, but it'll be seen.
Yeah.
Because that's what I think we all get involved in. For that, and I think Newport city centre is crucial, and it's got its fans, it's got its positives and negatives. We all know that, but all of this we want to see change, visual change, and I think we should be able to see that ourselves.
Yeah. I think so. There's the primary monitoring for this place form. So, but obviously feedback yourselves, as Tracy said, service plan. Trying to beef up the service plan, so it's more about actions and talk about the projects and the actions within that. So, but it may be worth as a separate session then to each respond about that.
Yeah, I certainly think it warrants its own agenda review, to be honest with you. If you think the way that we do service plans, we'd be asking you to break this down into, because your priority for this year or the next sort of 1 to 2 years around public safety would be those number of actions that you would report on at the service review. But in terms of the progress of the plan, I think that warrants its own sort of agenda item. Would be my own sort of take on it. And if I can, while we're on that, what are the measurable indicators we're going to use to track success on this? Because none of that to me is in the plan. Do we know that? How are we measuring success? And you can say in terms of visual, you'll see it, but what data will we have? So what's the baseline data? Do we know the number of empty units, number of visitors, visitor satisfaction, use of the riverfront? How are we dealing with sort of safety, culture, biodiversity, river usage? What are all the KPIs that we're going to measure success against?
I suppose it all depends on the project we're delivering. So we've listed a number of the quick wins and short projects which will be delivering, and then obviously we'll be reporting on specific projects. But in terms of what it actually we do with the river, and it's one of those medium-term projects, I think it all depends on what perhaps you're trying to monitor the KPI would be from that. So you know, I think just an example, so the steel weight market, for example, depends happening out there, what the footfall factors tell us in terms of increased footfall. So there's lots of different indicators and measures we can use, but it all depends on exactly which project and intervention we can actually do. So I can't give you a list here now.
Yeah.
But whenever we do a project, one of the fundamental things is the.
I think, sorry, I was going to say, I think if we were to put this out to contract, is we would be demanding this of the contractors. Say, if we're going to pay all that money to do this, we need to be able to measure your performance and see what we're paying for, what we're contributing to, you know. So I think what you say is a fair question, and it does us good to have those measurements in place, because I'm sure that the ambition is to overachieve and bring this forward. And you know, 2035, it's all done. You know, great.
And we're not scared of that. It's something I think sort of we've done recently. With the music trail, I think we monitored that. The numbers coming in, I think was already, I can't remember, over 10,000 more people. So you know that there are things in place to do that. But as Tracy mentioned, depending on what it is, depends on how we measure it. So I think you've got to adapt to each part of it.
Yeah, no, I accept that. There'll be measures for each individual sort of priority measure, if you like. You know, measures on measures, but how do we know the plan is going to be? You know, what are we measuring on the whole plan?
There's a section.
But we don't, sorry, just finish. You don't want to be looking at this in 2040 and deciding whether you succeeded or not, because that's the risk, isn't it? And that's the point I'm getting to. It's a 15-year plan. You don't want to just assess it at the end and say we did or didn't do very well, you know. So
I was going to say, Chair, there's a section on monitoring, which is the high level indicators, like which they're going to be keeping an eye on as part of this. Some of them, you know, they could actually set a target that we don't know, you know, but they will show, you know, they're going in the right direction. They'll show there's some progress. But in terms of, go back to what we were saying, in terms of contracts, obviously, if there'll be lots of, you know, some of these things will be contracts, some of these things will be councillors, some of these things will be third-party individuals, and we shouldn't underestimate even the police. And we do need everyone else to come to the table, because with all the will in the world, the council can't do this.
Absolutely.
It doesn't. I mean, it doesn't have, for me, some legal responsibility to know the things. So it's about encouraging everyone, isn't it? We've got those high-level monitors there, but also each individual, this is a contract there. They'll have the separate monitors in there. But given
So played over with a lot of this kind of borrow stuff, and then all that was to be up in the trees. I think what's very, very clearly set down over it. So some of those, so those other things were set between the 18 and the proposed as an initial street potential numbers, because that would be required to change. We'll capture the last process as well. So things like jobs creating get required, things like the legislature, gathering that information all the time, because funding require it, they'll get the money actually potentially. That is contract.
So I guess probably my first opening statement was, is this an ambitious plan? That's my question to each one of you. Is this really an ambitious plan? And do we know if it is? Do we have, you know, do we know enough of what's going to happen to say it really is ambitious? I suppose as well, I'd like to know, how does it compare to what other progressive cities do? We look at other plans and say, you know,
I think, isn't there examples of other cities in the plan?
on specific items, but probably more local cities, I guess.
I think for myself, sort of, this is our city. So sort of, you know, as we all know, you know, we're the fastest growing city in Wales, etc. But this is our plan. This is our city. So we've got to get it right for here. If we can take examples from other areas, I'm sure other cities have got their own views and their own plans. But for us, as I said, I'll go back to it. Is it ambition? I believe it is, because of the period of time and what it takes in. And also, I think along the way, I think this is what's really key, is that along the way, other things could come up. You could see other things and think, hold on a second, that could be part of that. Why didn't we?
So it's not static.
No, not at all.
It can be over 15 years, because things will change, the ideas will change. But to talk about that steel wheel market stuff, that'd be good to see, you know, see how that goes over the next few years. But it could be that entire concept changes in a few years' time.
And that's amazing, and that's the way it should be.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Which,
You have this a lot of exciting stuff in there, so big well there. I do, however, think that you've missed a couple of great wins there. I'm not sure if this is the place to, bring it up. When do we add then sort of stuff?
I'm sure.
Which,
Contact me.
yeah.
Contact me for our grant. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'll mention a couple
Yeah.
of them, mate, because a couple of them can lead to debates and whatnot. I want to avoid stuck in the mud, but that's exactly what it is. Metal gating, trolleys, bikes, beneath the wave, things quite
Cleaner.
clean up, it's fine when the tide's up, tide's down, it's very unsightly. Surprised that one picked up. The second one was begging. Begging's been mentioned, problematic a couple of times. Why are we not banning begging in the city? Seems a quick solution. Thirdly, I think Councillor Montfort's touched on this. Police patrols. There's no mention of any extra patrols. And then there's some long-term stuff language.
On begging, it's pretty good saying the PSPO does go through full council, isn't it? And
Yeah.
It's a full council requirement, and so there's some restrictions on begging. I think I think that's the sort of being full council exactly what they go as being.
Yeah.
Proximity to a cash flow.
Yeah.
Activities, yeah.
So that's what
There is a ban, but
Yeah,
it's.
there's a-
it's-
There is a ban, is there?
Yeah, there's a ban. What I would say is there's a ban.
Apologise.
Yeah.
It wasn't
There's a
ban.
I suppose there's two different things, isn't it? Does that ban go far enough? As it
Yeah.
should be blanket no stop,
Yeah.
and also how well enforced it is. So
Yeah.
I think those two things play into it as well. But
There's a ban, but it's not a wholesale ban on begging properties, but it's,
Does it cover the
it's that
whole of
what
it?
you mean, Matt, the aggressive begging close
Yeah.
to cash machines and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Can be exactly, but. Yeah. Shall I let
Yeah,
Councillor
yeah.
speak? Of course. If that's okay. Councillor Screen?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And there's a lot of detail in this, and quite right, it's got the detail. But I think as an observation, I think there's three things with this. I think one, it's got a vision. Okay, it's got a vision, which is something, people may agree or disagree with it, but it's actually got a vision of what Newport should be in 7 years' time or whatever. And secondly, it's got ambition. And I think that's important. I think there needs to be ambition because there is a lot of negative perceptions about Newport, some of it coming from its own residents. And I think it has to be ambitious to counter those negative perceptions. And then thirdly, it's a plan. It's a plan. And that's something we can say to the residents of Newport. Look, we got a plan. You may disagree or agree with it. You may want to alter it or change it or whatever, tweak it up, but it's a plan. And I think those three elements are very important, as we go forward over the next few years. So yes, I commend this, this document. I think it's positive. I think we need to welcome it and work to make it happen. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Screen. Councillor Morgan?
I see it more as a framework to a plan. It's a structure that you build a plan around, and build down. But the thing I was going to say was, and I know everything's somewhere in the document, there's been a lot of talk, rightly or wrongly, about the Green Cross and the accessibility, if you like, to the town centre. Where does that fit into the vision? Is the accessibility for traffic and pedestrians? It goes back to the active travel plus. What about the old Green Cross? Do we need to look in detail at how people get in and out of the city centre? And should that be part of the vision of the plan?
I think it's more about how future plans fit in with the placemaking plans. We're not prescriptive, and to use your phrase, it's a framework. It's how we see the city centre function and evolving.
But it's one of the most key things, and
Absolutely.
the challenge, we're down to perception again, but also the reality. For some people, it's difficult to get into the town centre. It's a big challenge. So no matter how great it is, in the future, accessibility is still a challenge, whether it's the buses, whether it's bikes, walking. It is a challenge. So shouldn't that be part of the framework to look in for a plan, a master plan together for accessibility, tie it in, or
I don't disagree, but going back to your phrase of it being the framework and then the plans fit beneath the framework.
can we put it in the framework?
The plan for the Hill Green would need to reflect and align with what we're saying is the vision for the city centre. So that would be a separate plan on its own. So that wouldn't form part an individual.
I agree, but where I disagree perhaps is on the vision that the city centre is an easily accessible place for people who are coming from outside of the city. It's easy to get to, and then how do we make it easy to get to? You know, one of the key metrics. Thanks. So
I also on Councillor Screen's point, it's really important to mention the vision, the ambition of the plan framework as Councillor Comfort. I think what's really important on this placemaking is that when I go back to it, it's everyone's plan, and that's why it was so key that in my day, I'm not sure the same as Councillor Wolf, I'm not sure. I can't remember cross
Progress.
I can't remember that, and that's self-evident. It was so important that this wasn't a political football. Because Councillor Moffat mentioned it, that when I look at him and he's looking at me, maybe some of us won't be hearing. And I'm not looking at the young relevant. So some of us may not be here to see it through, but that's why it's important that it's cross-party and it's not used as that political football, because it's bigger than that. This is for the future, that maybe after the next elections, whatever happens in our lives, so it carries on. Yeah, and that's why this is so important. So I just want to mention that after what Councillor Scrutiny said.
And I think just to pick up, I think it's a good thing that it's not overly ambitious, because when it becomes overly ambitious, it becomes unrealistic. Yeah. So I think you've got the right balance. So well.
It's got to be smart, hasn't it? It's got to be, achievable, otherwise it's pointless. Papers.
And it's interesting. Councillor Clark says this is not our plan, this is everybody's plan, but somebody has to be accountable to make the plan work. So somebody has to own the plan. You can't just spread it out and say, sure, it's didn't do enough.
Or well done.
Or save me doing it. No, but you see what I mean? It has to, there has to be an ownership, a sense of ownership. Ability, I suppose, of one level is current administration, whoever that is, you know, it's now, but in the future, will be perceived to be accountable for making this work. You know, if you look in the Argus and the Commons page, it's not going to say, oh, the people let the city down, is it? It's Councillor Clark let the city down. Whoever.
Councillor Moffat, if it's and that's absolutely a fair point. But you have to have it. Yeah, also you have to have a plan. You have to move forward. We could not have a plan and just carry on. But you have to be bold and put a plan in place. And as Councillor Screen mentioned, had the vision. As Councillor Pym mentioned, sort of get the balance right, which is really important. Because you have to move forward and you have to be brave and you have to be bold. Because someone has to do it. And you know, I stand by that statement. I stand by that there will be wins in the first 2 years. But as I said, if we don't do this, we just carry on plodding along and doing a great job what we're doing. But you have to be bold, and that's what this is. And what comes of it, and I think discussing with Councillor Pym is sort of, there will be tweaks, there will be changes, there will be, you know, and that's why the cross-party was so important. And moving it forward, why sort of involvement of others is so important, because again, our gift as a council, our gift as councillors is we don't know everything, we can't do everything, but you can get people around the table. You have got that, and that's where the key stakeholders are, and that's why it's so important to have them on board And also, if we're going to push this forward, which I hope we all will, is that we as a council have to have those wins at the start for people to believe. So that we're confident in what's in front of us.
I think the easiest thing in the world is to do nothing. It would be the easiest thing to do, but I don't think anybody, none of you are elected and none of us come to work to do nothing. And to see progress.
That's not the impression anybody's given it. I think if you go back to 2018 and look at the master plan, which I think from memory was about 9 pages, this is an incredible step forward. Again, it's a framework that needs filling in, but it's a direction to go, and it should be something that's cohesive that pulls people together. Yes, people might say we need to go a little bit that way, we need to go faster, we need to go slower, whatever they say, but it's a journey that people can start to go on. So I'm positive about that side of it.
Councillor Brian?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Well, first of all, I think it should be commended how this whole process has gone on the consultation. Remember the big ideas, the post notes out in John Square, but just where you engage everybody, I think it's really, really good, really positive. And even the first sentence, you go, the city centre is a thriving place filled with excitement and fun experiences. Well, we are there at the moment. We had the other weekend, came down to see the historic Barry. The sea shanty, and that was amazing. Saturday and Sunday's brilliant, packed out. And as Councillor Clark mentioned, we had the music festival. Amazing. We are a destination city for events. There's no disputing that. Talk people to come down from all over to see things happening here. And it's great that this report is building on our musical heritage. And it mentions about the possibility of the Great Hall, Great City Hall being open again as a music venue. And it's brilliant. We have the Chord Exchange, 5 capacity venue, always full, always full. So yeah, we are a thriving city. Stuff in this street is really, really good. But my question would be though, and you mentioned it in relation to funding from Welsh Government, what strategy you put in place that should administration change Welsh Government that we're going to have the fund to see these things through?
I suppose really when we develop any strategic project, it's all approved by cabinet. So we've got a delivery plan, we've got costs, and that's agreed by cabinet. We make sure we secure the relevant funding. We go into delivery phase. So personally, I don't think that is impacted by change in administration, because those funds are committed in terms of the capital programme or Welsh Government funding.
Yeah, it's Welsh Government funding us. Yeah.
Yeah. So either way, those funds are locked and allocated in.
The conditions of Welsh Government funding around regeneration, state health placemaking part of the process, and shape and this predominant is Welsh Government's policy is that we beyond good. Sometimes first, it's like tradition for Wales, also after the plan comment on it. All these things are also for Welsh Government's national policy. Is what drives the best towns centres. So having a placemaking plan is in of itself mitigation against that risk of shaping the Welsh Government, because they've got that the best attempt to get the possibilities. The plan of placemaking plan is the sort of the gateway to it, which is sort of like
Okay, Councillor Scrutiny.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, as a plan, there should be flexibility built in, because no plan survives first contact with the enemy, so to speak. So it's got to be flexible, and there are going to be times where the plan will have to be adjusted and changed. But going back to the vision and ambition, I think, which is important, I think anyway, just to quote Robert Browning, the poet, a man's grasp should exceed his grasp, or what's heaven for. We really got to go for whatever we can, as far as we can go with this. And I think we got to take the people of Newport with us as well, and that obviously involves asking them what they want to see, what they want at the end of it. But yeah, I think I think there's something really important to this city, and we must make it succeed. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Scrutiny. I don't think there was a question there. We need to come back on Councillor Pym.
Yeah, so I think Councillor Bright mentioned the Great Central Hall. Not many people in the city know we even exist. Is there any plans you can divulge or give us?
Really,
No,
no, it's
no, not
private
yet.
ownership.
Small, long term. Oh, it's private ownership.
Right, we
Okay.
don't own it.
Yeah.
So it's a case of trying to work within the.
I was going to ask if we could commit members could have a tour or something, but obviously
Not about it.
it's not. It's not okay.
By helicopter.
Yeah.
But no, we definitely, we're having conversations with the owner, because this is
Yeah.
one of his plans.
Is there an option to purchase it then in the future? Is that a possibility?
Maybe,
or
I just think that we're not advanced with those sorts of plans.
Yeah.
But,
This is just a shame that it's being unused.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay, I think there's a certain amount of agreement to it. How are we going to go forward with the promotion? Because I saw it in the office. I think it's. Is it the right thing to do? Should this be on the council webpage? Should this be council led in terms of the promotions? So that the council is seen to be at the forefront. How are we going to promote this in the most positive way is the question.
I think my view on this is by doing. I think that's really, really key. So we can launch this and promote it straight away, and we've done a lot so far. I think I think a council sometimes should be measured in what you do, and I think for us, or my view is how you promote it is maybe after a period of time say these are the things we've done, these are the things we've done, rather than things we're going to do. These are the things we've done. I think there's no better promotion than that, and then we'll go to and show on the main council what matters, or whatever communication, however communication works, comms, I think is what it's called. But I think what the people in Newport want to see is this to start moving. And I think there's no better promotion than showing the wins which we can do at pace. So that's where I'd reverse it in a way, rather than a big promotion on it, rather than a big fanfare. This is what we're going to do. Is no, actually, this is what we've done.
So.
Yeah, I think so, Councillor Montford.
I think that's partly agree and partly don't. I think the doing is great, but you have to tell as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you know, like been very critical of our comms function. You know, where you and I have had this conversation a couple of times, Paul. You know, we do lots of good stuff and don't tell anybody about it. You know, we're not very good at self-promotion. I would say generally that's a fairly sweeping statement. You know, there are some good examples in that. So I think we do have to get on and do stuff, because we'll be measured in the things that we do. I'm talking about forcing things. We have to tell, because people just have this negative perception about the city centre and the lack of the things. And actually, there are a number of very good initiatives that have happened in the city centre over the last couple of years that have made significant improvements to it, that don't feature in public perception. They're just ignored because either people don't know, or those good things are drowned out by, you know, the negative PR around the bad things that that we need to challenge. And I think so. We need to do a lot of work in terms of changing perception that the plan won't do by itself. There's got to be a voice to the plan, if you like, that we need to think about, and that what I would expect that to be in the plan. But you know, it's something that's going to be really important.
It's getting that balance, isn't it, Councillor? It's getting that balance. But I can tell you that there will be comms on this when the first couple of ideas happen. So there will be, because it is really important. I think you know, a lot of people have taken a lot of time in this. And Councillor Brian touched on it with the posties and the post-it notes in John Frost Square, and a lot of people who have put their time and effort. And we understand that. Our own officers are putting this together. and sort of other stakeholders and key partners in it. So I think sort of we need to get this message out and keep that. I would say, Councillor, keep that positivity going.
Yeah.
And the good news stories, and it's something which I think we are getting better. I know we're getting better on, but you can always get better. So let me tell you, there will be messages going out on this, but I totally get your point.
Yeah, it just needs that voice to
Totally get
it
your
needs to be lived in terms of voice. And I'm just going to pick up a point which comes to Malcolm made right at the start, which as we've gone through the meeting, we've all called this something different. I think you probably called it 2 or 3 different things. Tracy has been talking, Matty called it something else. I'm still not sure we got the name right and clear about what this is. Because essentially it's a city centre placemaking plan, not a Newport placemaking plan. And you've called it city centre placemaking plan several times as you've talked. And it's not a plan either, it's a strategy. And I guess we're calling it a plan because, and we're calling it a placemaking plan because of the point you made, Matt, that then opens the door to the funding streams, and Welsh Government saying we have to have a placemaking plan in order to, get funding. So we're being dictated to in terms of the funding, but actually this is a city centre improvement strategy. That's what it is. And so we are being asked to comment on the strategy. We don't have the detail on the plan. And so, one of the comments I've made a few times is this lacks detail. And we picked up earlier on, right at the start, really, because Ray made the point that, that detail will come in plans that will form each priority area. So I hear from what you were saying, Tracy, each priority area will almost have its own action plan. We want to improve the public realm, and then an action plan will come in and say we're going to replace the street paving and the street lights and what have you. So there'll be the detail. So we're asked to comment on strategy. Really, we call it plan, but we're asked. The strategy for me is right, but we don't have, and the public don't have the detail to understand what it is we're going to actually do. And that's the bit again that goes into voice. What are we actually going to do? What is going to make a difference to people's lives? What outcomes are we going to get? So not the outputs as well, but the outcomes for people. So all that bit's missing, and who is responsible for delivering that action plan? So what we need to do in terms of accountability, is there a lead officer or delivery for each strand? Is there a lead officer from several different organisations, and how do they fit into that? I think you called it like a board, didn't you? Governing board, place board. So it'd be good to understand a structured document, I think, for me. So this is what that looks like. This is the board. This is how you're going to report to it. These are the leads that are going to be responsible for it. So you've got some accountability. I don't know whether that forms part of the plan, but I just think that would be a useful exercise to present to the committee and to the wider public in terms of how we're going to generate that accountability.
Tracy, most of those points, but on the strategy, so I only attended a fraction of these events that these guys have attended, but even in the fraction I did, there was everyone wanted to call it something different. I was in the strategy world because it is effectively for this area the top level strategy. The specific, it has to set the vision. It does all the things a strategy would do. The details are underneath. But I think we'll never agree on what to call this. So I think we're giving up the will to live, and it is what it is now. But I take your point on that. I think
it just helps you communicate. I know that you've kind of had lots of conversations about it, but it's key to comms. It's really key to comms.
I think in terms of then you have to the ownership. It'll be much like sort of project stuff that you see at you'll see as part of the service planning and trying to get much more project focus. You see them, within behind that, and there is a lead officer for each stream, but the overarching lead officer for this will be Tracy. But yeah, it's obviously not this.
I mean, I suppose the stage we're at the moment is this needs to go to Canada to be approved. So we've addressed and recognised the need for this to be continually held to account, to be monitored, and make sure that it's being implemented as per what NFO's expectations are. So the recommendation is that we call this place bold, and that's up to the cabinet to essentially decide whether that's appropriate or not. So
Yeah.
it's a little bit chicken and egg really. If they don't agree with the plan, they'll be looking to the board.
Yeah.
But obviously they do. We've said that we need to do this together.
It's sort of back as well, after around 1 year forward, there's all delivery for a number of those different organisations, and others obviously we're all going to take the plans through their own processes with what quality as well, so that was clear out. And that's just a sort of step before the police board is formulated, and we by discussion with the member over the cabinet, so we're talking about the civil board. So we'll have sort of process for replacement plan for the key strategy or culture investigation. The schools records, because I think we're as well we're avoid a body that has that sort of ownership of these objectives and they put those different plans together.
Yeah.
So it feels a bit like jumping the gun a bit to say this steps in the ENC, like review force, right? So in council plans for all of them, so this to come along. Okay.
Yeah, and the council's role is facilitate and an enabler in lots of this because there's so many stakeholders. So I get that. I just kind of think, if you, as a strategy, this hits a nail on the head. As a plan, it doesn't, right? Because it woefully lasting thing as a plan, but as a strategy, it doesn't. So it's about, and I still think that is really important in the comms world because that's perception. And the perception is you haven't really got a plan. But this isn't a plan, it's a strategy. So I just think, and I would like us to make that recommendation to Cabinet just to think about that messaging and what we expect to deliver. Because I put this into AI, right, and said, what do you think of this? And it says, and I'll read it, the plan presents a broad vision for transforming it, but currently lacks any detail on performance measures, government and delivery mechanisms. Right? Because all that stuff isn't meant to be in here because it's a strategy or a plan, but AI is looking at this as a plan. And I know that's off piece a little bit, but it's just the way that we're tuned to kind of understand what we're reading and the difference between strategy and plan. So hopefully that's what happens. And it's about just selling that to the public because when you read it, it's like, yeah, look. I just want to say, because all that sounds really negative, but I'm just trying to, I welcome the plan. I think it's great that we've got a strategy for delivering improvement. It's about messaging what are we actually doing. I think we've delivered a good strategy, but we haven't quite got, and we probably have got a plan. There is in this document. So it's about that. So it's not trying to be negative, it's just trying to, because I'm mindful from a comments point of view, public perception, you've read it, comments on the Argus, but the public perception is just another rehashed master plan. I think there's a lot of apathy to it.
For me, it's something that they're both, I think, got to offer plan, where it's a strategy that you look down the line.
Yeah. So it's a messaging bit. So it's not a criticism of what's been produced. It's how it's spread, if you like, in terms of
We're a little bit hamstrung by the requirements of Welsh Government for a plan.
Yeah. That was the start.
The interesting thing as well, if I can add to what you said, was it is a strategy, but it doesn't have aspirations to be a plan. It's not going to evolve into a plan because what you said earlier was anything that constitutes a deep down, drill down of what's going to happen will be in another document. So it is it's a source, top level source document that should be updated and say for details on this, see that, and have a map of how you navigate what's going on. Because it's, if I can't explain it to someone else, right, and I don't understand it, I don't think it's right. We should all be able to go away and say, as councillors at least, and senior officers, we should be able to say, this is what's going on, and this is, it's not in there, it's in there, and understand the organisation of the bigger picture, the plans, the details, the strategies.
But it's not really negative. No, it's not intended to be completely negative, because as a, a vision for the city centre, I think that's great. Whether we achieve that by 2030 or 2040, I think if you put that in front of anybody in Newport and surrounding, and you say that's what we will achieve and you can guarantee it, they say, yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. So the vision is right for what we want to achieve. So not to dwell on the point about plans and strategies, in terms of how are we going to engage the community in terms of feedback on an ongoing basis, not just because there's been loads of initial consultation done. Basically, you outlined that in the presentation. That was really helpful. We've kept the public, we've taken the public 60 big ideas and those people contributed. How do we continue to engage them in the process as we go through?
Well, on the videos mentioned in the section, unfortunately, most of the Lleoedd as well as part of the discussion, I think.
My particular theme is increasing consumption of food and beverage in the city centre.
Yeah.
I can type.
Some of that reflects what we get about so we at the top of the plan. So successful plus one point things like that. So we'll put that again, get satisfaction and essentially things that we asked, which inform the development of the plan, which is why identity perception feedback is so central, because that's why identity perception is central to it. Or the people measures, I guess the point is trying to make things do that again and again and again through the resource.
Yeah, and you can pull survey and such things as well, can't you? Like you do on the bus with it, you've got the QR code or whatever.
Yeah, that was pretty successful. There's some culture share as well, particularly again.
Yeah,
partners and their benefits as well, to actually make some targeted.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. And resourcing and capacity. So, being as your lead officer for the whole of this, Tracy, is yeah, does the council and to appoint these partners, although that's probably not a question necessarily you can answer, have the staff funding and capacity in place to deliver the short and medium term actions outlined?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, I'm sure you saw cabinet, I think last week, where we've put an extra £500,000 to the regeneration team, which some of this will go towards. So that's the statement we're making as a cabinet. So it's something we're not fearful of, is it?
That is specifically about capacity, isn't it? That's people who deliver and support these projects, both the ones we can deliver ourselves and also others to do that.
That's probably it from me, I think. It's just that perceptions piece, like it's comes after the plan. It's just that concept. So, yeah, that's what I'm sort of worried about. We need to get. Any other questions from the committee? No.
Yeah, could say come back to columns. So I just think Kingsway, Kingsway. Every day on my Facebook feed, there's an advert like this chapping looking around Kingsway with this video camera. Say, come, just want to highlight the way they're portraying Newport positively and how the good stuff is going on in Kingsway. We talk about columns, and it'd be nice to have other stakeholders doing some sort of thing, going around saying, it's happening in our environment. Because every day there's a new video about what's going on in Kingsway. And I was there on the weekend, the craft market, and maybe had the shops, and then the shops have stalls outside their shop to make it look bigger and more. It's really nice atmosphere down there. And with Sim City Comics as well, largest comic store in Wales. And then it's just this one chap walking around with a video camera. I'm sure he's got trained and whatever. But the way it comes across is really, really positive. And if other stakeholders can get on board with that as well, I think that'd be really good at getting our message across and their message. So it's not just us, it's everybody's doing it.
I think that's really interesting, because I know we also done a video for the Newport Trail about different areas you can go and watch the music, etc. So I think that's very similar, and Councillor Bright, I think that's really important about it. So I've seen exactly the same videos for the gentleman Kingsway. That's come from relationships with the Kingsway. We've got very, very strong relationships with the owners of the Kingsway, talking about how to do things and sort of, and exactly that. So if you can see that, we use that as an example. Another area can maybe take that as an idea as other areas. So that's the whole thing of the relationship now within the city centre. With I go on it again with the key stakeholders. We're part of that now. We're part of those conversations. The owner of the Kingsway, you know, if he doesn't text me at 10:30 at night with another idea, I'm chasing him up. But exactly that reason, that positivity of getting out there, and we'll do our bit. But examples like that, where maybe a year ago no one sort of knew the owners of the Kingsway. Look how much they're doing, and there's a lot more to come from there. And we'll push each other in the future to keep moving forward and keep moving forward. So that's a great example. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else from any of the committee? Yeah, really good discussion. We need to follow some recommendations from that, Neil.
Some comments I think. So, requests I've had this as possible returning agenda item on the progress against the plan in about 2 years.
Well, it's
Can I just clarify something? You're on about this cross-party team. Is that has been finished? I mean, is that going forward now?
we can discuss this, haven't we? It was tasked and finished. I finished. But as I said, in-person conversations will carry on. Because again, it's not one person's city; it's all of our cities.
18 months. Something like that.
My take is the recommendation is that if officers need to understand the reporting and governance structures and make a recommendation for where progress is reported to, because what I don't want to do is, you know, if we talked about earlier that sort of, you know, who's responsible for what in terms of these, what you don't want to do is just be coming back here if you're already reporting somewhere else. So well, actually, the recommendation is to Cabinet, isn't it? So Cabinet need to understand the reporting and feedback mechanisms and accountability. Yeah. Looking any help offered? It's great to receive.
A lot of projects wanted to renew it for 6 months anyway, to
Yeah.
those specific projects. that
Yeah.
form part of the service plan. As Councillor Fox says, his intention is that it's more about done. So it may be government that share prosperity further than we do, and I don't that data cover there. Yeah, in terms of how it comes back to it. I don't know what people would also have to report back to much.
Yeah.
So there's lots of different ways that we're capturing this and just to bring it together.
The scrutiny's role, you know, we might decide to call this as part of our forward work programme in the future. To see how things are going, but I'm not sure scrutiny should always have sort of regular updates and progress. And I don't. What do you think, Paul? I mean, I'm not sure that's necessarily scrutiny's role, just to ask things to keep coming back.
I think the difference between the place forward and scrutiny is place forward is it's more of an officer monitoring check, or you know, we will have critical. So this is more transparent and open. Scrutiny isn't should be worth it, but I think you're probably right. I think you should call it as and when it's needed to, because it may find its feet there, doesn't it, rather than set it with a particular thing. But I think that there's probably some merit beyond the detailed updates within service plans. There's probably some merit of saying that probably have we achieved that 2-year target at some stage.
Yeah,
it feels maybe
so,
that'll fall out.
Maybe we recommend something to the cabinet understand the kind of reporting and accountability mechanisms, and it's added for consideration as part of the forward work programme for scrutiny in 2 years' time. Everybody happy with that? The recommendation, that makes sense? Just repeat it. We recommend that the cabinet understand the kind of reporting and accountability mechanisms.
Yeah.
of the whole plan, and that an update gets agended for the full work programme for the scrutiny committee interviews. Consideration to agenda it.
18 months.
We say 18 months ago. Everybody happy with that recommendation?
Makes sense. We say 18 months.
Yes. I'm content with 18 months. Everybody else happy with that? Yeah.
Any recommendation?
Yeah. Try and formulate it together. So yeah. Okay.
General comments as well. Against the bright suggestion about the Kingsway promotion, and see if we do something similar and start saying that the perception is important just to ensure that promotion is made when the quick wins are made, which comes in.
Yeah. Okay.
So there was comments on naming, wasn't there, as well?
I was just going to say that. Yeah. So my recommendation would be that come consider that the naming of the plan in the context of comps, effectively giving the plan a voice. Everybody happy with that? Yeah. Strategy, I mean. No, I'm joking. Okay. Anything else on the placemaking plan? Fantastic. Okay. Thanks, everybody. It's really constructive conversation. Yeah.
Excellent.
Thanks all. Cheers.
What's the patch? Which are the dragons? We don't know.
Dragons in it. The dragons in it. Yeah, it's in the plan that they intend to create the training.
Yeah.
So,
I thought we might only allow them.
no, I know that the dragons have sort of, talked for some time about kind of how to redevelop that.
Yeah.
Item 5 on the agenda, scrutiny advisor reports. So you, Neil, if that's all right.
Thanks very much. So just to give a committee a brief update, the scrutiny team have been in discussions as well with the chairs on how we can improve the way that we take feedback back, keeping up with the actions and outcomes. The previous comment was made that we do make recommendations and outcomes to officers in cabinet. However, we sometimes don't know if they've been received, that are they going to accept them, are they not going to accept them, what's the reason why not. So we've updated these tables with statuses such as complete, ongoing or outstanding. So what we'll do, we advise from the officers, is the action complete, is it going to be taken on board, and if it's not, what is the reason why. Also including the date that we send out these comments, recommendations, and the dates we receive them back. So there has been some instances in the past where we've been waiting for a couple of months for some feedback. So hopefully this will be more help.
It's about closing the loop.
Yeah.
So we say we make a lot of recommendations, but we don't get feedback.
So at the moment, we everything's all currently up to date. So we've got our actions and recommendations that we make for the rapid rehousing transition plan. We'll send the recommendations for today's meetings to officers the next day or two, and then we'll keep you updated on the comments that we receive back. And we've got the draft annual forward work programme. Ourselves, we've worked with heads of service, strategic directors. We've looked through previous years to check your agenda topics to come to you. A lot of these agenda items are stuff that are applying to come, such as the mid-year reviews, end-of-year reviews, and the budget proposals as well. And there's been a couple of requests for returning agenda items, such as the customer contact improvement. This initially came to committee last year, so this is a yearly update. We've also got as a request from myself, Chair, communication performance update, which is an update on communications, what we're doing on certain service areas, the PR. Then On the 16th of February, we've got a recruitment and retention update, and we had this about 2 years ago, so this will be another update for that. And just important note to the committee that the forward rule of the programme is your own. You are free to add meetings if you wish. You're free to add agenda items as well, as long as we are able to add value to it. It's might be to receive the end of the review. She might feel that you want to take a deep dive into survey. I'd say this part. Again, I said we've got availability on 1st September meeting, another slot for the February, or if the committee wishes, we can always add a March or an April meeting. So this is always open document, so we like for each.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just reiterate what I said to committee last time and the time before, and obviously there's a few new members now, to kind of have a look at those areas. These are your opportunities to kind of deep dive into service area. You know, we cover most of the service areas of this week. Your opportunity to look into the areas that residents are feeding back to you and saying, you know, this isn't very good or whatever, and we can then, you know, ask for some detail about your performance and make some suggestions on how it might be improved. So please do come forward with ideas. I put the communication stuff on here because that's been a recurring theme of the committee, Alex, you'll remember, over the last sort of year, 18 months. So that's why we've looked at comms performance. But please do suggest other things for us to look at.
Until next week then.
7th of June, yeah.
That'll be the end of year before the
year reviews, yeah.
That'll be for the place directorate. So for that, we'll have housing and communities, regeneration, infrastructure, environment, and public protection. Just to reply, Chair, we need to put on environment and public protection and regen on first, because the leader has got whether it's external invitee and they need
we don't vote on that.
That's right. We'll switch up the remaining, and we'll do the same for the corporate director as well.
Yeah, obviously.
It's just the minutes of the previous meeting, Chair.
And then we got another 1 2 weeks after, 3 weeks after.
We've got the corporate directorate 2 weeks after that. Then we'll have the August recess, and then we're back then September.
Okay, minutes of the last meeting. I mean, it was fairly short meeting, wasn't it? Quite swift. So probably housing. Everybody happy with them, Alex?
None of us was here.
Alan, you were here last time. You happy with the minutes of the last meeting?
Sorry?
You were here last time. Were you happy with the minutes of the last meeting?
Yes, I'm fine. Yes, yes. Yes, they're
Yes,
okay.
seconded. So, okay. Meeting closed. 16:13.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Is that the minimum we need then, 4 of us? Or
3 actually.